Robert, thank you for taking time to talk with us. This is part three of our look at who really killed Daria Dugina. And you have some thoughts about that. Would you start off first by telling us what your thoughts are about what happened to her?
Well, first of all, it was some sort of inside job. And what I mean by that is the bomb went off on a road, not around any other cars. And so I suspect, and this is speculation, come on, we don't know about Russia, that I suspect that it was remote controlled. And it was apparently put under her seat. They could have taken the bomb and blown her up in the parking lot, like with a pressure device. I mean, by the way, I went to CIA bomb school, so I have a fundamental idea how you do these things. They could have blown it up in the parking lot, but they would have killed other people. Someone could have been passing. So what I suspect is that they had good surveillance on Daria. They knew her route. They knew she'd be there. She knew that someone got in the car. It was either her or her father. Anyhow, was a valid target. And they killed her. And it was a message. It was an internal message. Only the Russians inside the Kremlin can understand it, to Putin. Did Putin kill her? No, this is just not reasonable, because you just look at the press after it was announced that she'd been murdered. It was all over the place. They weren't prepared for this. The state outlets and the rest of it just doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense that Putin would set off an explosion in a high-end suburb. Just keep in mind, this is speculation. We're talking about Russia, and we're never going to get the truth out of the FSB or the Kremlin. Never. Even if it served their interest to give us the truth, we're not going to get it.
Okay, so we can get into the inner workings of the Kremlin a little bit more in just a moment, but you have worked as a CIA operative in the past, and you've written as well about bombs and cars, etc. And you have a very good knowledge of the technical process here. So just taking a look at what took place and how it took place, is this something that could have been thrown together, or was this something that took a while to piece together?
No, it took a while, definitely, JJJ. It wasn't ad hoc. I've actually done a film for British television called Car Bomb, and we picked through every car bombing going back to 1920. And anybody that can kill somebody very precisely in a moving car has got to know what they're doing. You can say, maybe they got lucky, maybe they did, but I doubt it. So they probably used excuse me, they probably used a remote control device. That means that they either had a GPS locator, they had a cell phone in there, and they had some sort of encrypted signal, because when you're making one of these bombs, you don't want a random signal to set it off, especially as you're putting the bomb in the car and arming it. So they probably went through all the safety measures. And in an assassination, it's not so much killing the person, it's sending the message to a particular target, which in this case, I speculate it's telling Putin, we can get to anybody in Russia we like. So beware.
All right, so we'll get to that, but I'm still talking about this process. One of the things that I heard was that there was no surveillance of this particular place where the car, essentially blew up. But with somebody as high profile, I suppose, as she and her father going to this festival, and just the festival in general, and considering, the climate in Russia, Moscow, and this war going on, I mean, typically there is surveillance going on, right?
Well, that's one of the things. I mean, the people who murdered her, I would imagine, wherever they placed the bomb, whether it was in an apartment building or in the parking lot of this festival, knew that there was no CCTV coverage, because the last thing they wanted to be is identified. So I would imagine they did a lot of pre-casing for this, that they could wherever their watchers were, and the technician who put the bomb in, knew that he wouldn't be photographed. That's why I say it's so sophisticated. I mean, look, JJ, I used to make bombs and the rest of it in training, but I'd never touch anything like this, and especially in Moscow. Just don't have the knowledge, don't have the capabilities, and don't have the people on the ground.
Were these likely military grade explosives?
I think almost certainly it was military grade explosives, because to actually kill somebody, you cannot have, let's say, a small ammonium nitrate bomb or anything that pushes. You need something, what they call, the French word is brisance, that really cracks so that shrapnel came up through the seat. Again, this is speculation, but if you really want to get it right, electric detonator, military explosives, something equivalent of C4.
And these are tools that not your ordinary person can get a hold of, I suppose, and certainly not somebody coming supposedly from Mariupol into Russia.
There's no way anybody would take a risk of driving. I mean, you could always bribe soldiers, but you're just adding to the risk of getting caught. And once your networks are caught, you can't hit again. So I've listened to a lot of speculation in Moscow, and if I could just jump forward, and it almost sounds like an insider in the FSB with technical capabilities, and then of course motivation. But motivation is always the worst thing to judge an assassination. But the motivation might be to send Putin a message saying, hey, you're listening to these fascists like Dugin and the rest of them. They're crazy, and we're tired of this war. That's the best explanation I've heard from Russians. As one Russian told me in Moscow, the long knives are out. In other words, there's going to be more of these hits.
Yeah, a couple of people mentioned that to me months ago, and I think you were one of those people. This whole thing about why is really the most complicated part of this process. I mean, putting a bomb together like this, clearly, and an assassination can't be simple, and it was complicated as you've explained. But just looking at the many explanations or the many speculative approaches to what took place here, one of the things was, okay, there was some group called the National Republican Army that did it. Then there is, of course, what Russia says Ukraine did it, which is it just doesn't seem on the face of it possible. But then there's what you're saying is, yeah, the FSB did it. It was an inside job, but it wasn't an inside job to frame Ukraine. It was a message to Putin. That is the most complicated part of this. And so why would the FSB need to do that?
Well, it's not the FSB itself as an organization. It's somebody in the FSB, because there's a lot of factions inside the FSB, as like there are any intelligence service. And then you have people that knew this war was wrong, maybe even had advised Putin, or maybe the advice didn't get to him, that don't do it. And you've got a lot of smart people in Russian intelligence that knows this stalemate, if it goes on for years, is going to destroy Russia. And in a very Russian way, they sent a message to the hardliners. And like I said, it's not the top of the FSB. But again, I emphasize this is speculation. You'll notice, JJ, nobody knows what was going on. The White House has come out and say, we don't have a clue. I've seen no commentators, experts on Russia, come up with a reasonable, well-informed explanation, which again throws us back on speculation.
So one thing you said earlier is that there might be more of this. And I'm thinking what you're getting at is more of the elites in Russia, more people that may be, if not directly related to Putin's inner circle or the Kremlin, but certainly indirectly. There may be more of these targeted at them, or who exactly?
Well, that's what Russians have told me, JJ, that there's going to be more, that it's just the first. I'm not saying there's going to be a coup d'etat against Putin, but there's going to be resistance in the ranks. And you can bet that this guy Putin is paranoid at this, because he understands how complicated this was, and the fact that it was basically in Moscow, and that he himself is vulnerable. I mean, if these people are as good as I speculate they are, as you could take like what's called a belly charge, and then use a lot of explosives under the road. I mean, this is worked in Spain, where you can take a convoy and just blow it into the air. They killed the prime minister there many years ago, but it's all very doable, and it's the kind of thing that Putin has to worry about. He just can't drive around Moscow as he wants to.
Put into words, Robert, the message to Putin that you think, or whoever the recipient of this message is. Put into words what you think the message is.
I think the message was to Putin: be careful, reconsider Ukraine. If you keep failing, you're next.
And in terms of failing, does this mean performing poorly in Ukraine, or being in Ukraine, period?
Well, it's one thing if he loses Crimea, we don't know that he is, but should he use or big parts of the Donbass, and the Russian army just, is completely obliterated in Ukraine, that's what they're basically telling him is find a way out of this. I just can't imagine another message, because my alternative is looking at Daria as a valid target, a Ukrainian target, which makes no sense. She's not. You've got military leaders in Moscow. So I just sort of dismiss that the Ukrainians had anything to do with this. And there's so many Russians that have this fascist bent of looking at Ukraine as subhumans, that she's just one of thousands. So it doesn't make any sense the Ukrainians did it. So I go back, it's an insider message. Somebody in the military or the FSB who knew what they were doing said, Volvo, as they call Putin, watch it.
Very last thing, who else aside from him might this message be intended for?
It's the crazies around Putin, like his number two, Patrushev, and people like that. There are people in the Duma that are crazy, and they're just there. It's like almost a communists, hardline communists, telegraphing to the fascists like Dugin, watch it. You guys are idiots. Do not take Russia down.
Okay. Robert, thank you as always. I appreciate your time. Before I go, I want to ask you, is there anything you want to add to this story that I haven't asked you about that you think is important, though?
I just think, as I always said, this is my hobby horse, is just how little we know about the power structure in Russia, which I just, I've got a good grasp of that. And there's nothing we can do about it. It's like getting inside the Gambinos, deep inside. It's not easy to do.
All right. Robert Baer, thank you very much again.
Thanks.